Hey there, fellow mystery seekers. Welcome to today's episode of Legends and Lore. David Culpepper here, and boy, do I have a story for you today. It was a lot of fun to dig into, but first, let me send a thank you out to all of you. I started this podcast because I wanted to talk about all the things that interest me, and I was hoping would interest some of you out there. Well, just a few weeks in, and let me tell you, the response has been amazing. I really appreciate the messages of encouragement and ideas for stories to include here. I really do. Thank you. I have a lot of things that I want to talk about here, and along with your suggestions, well, it should be enough to keep me busy for quite a while. But seriously, thank you for listening. So now let's get to this week's story. When we think of mysterious triangles where things vanish without a trace, our minds usually drift to the warm waters of the Caribbean. But there's another triangle, one that's been quietly collecting its own stories of disappearances and unexplained phenomena for centuries. Nestled between the green mountains of Vermont and the rugged peaks of New York's Adirondacks lies Lake Champlain, a 490 square mile expanse of dark, deep water that holds more secrets than fish. The Lake Champlain Triangle, as locals have come to call it, stretches from Port Henry, New York to Burlington, Vermont, and up to Plattsburgh, forming a region where boats vanish on calm days, where lights dance across the water in impossible patterns, and where something large enough to create 6-foot wakes has been spotted moving beneath the surface since before European settlers first mapped these shores. What makes this area particularly intriguing isn't just the number of incidents that have occurred here, it's how similar they are to cases reported in its more famous cousin, the Bermuda Triangle. We're talking about sudden equipment failures, inexplicable compass variations, and disappearances that happen in perfect weather conditions. But unlike the vast Atlantic Ocean, Lake Champlain is practically in people's backyards. You can stand on the shore in Burlington and literally see across to the other side, and yet somehow this relatively small body of water has managed to keep its secrets hidden in plain sight for generations. In tonight's episode, we're going to dive deep, both figuratively and through some fascinating sonar recordings, literally, into the mysteries of the Lake Champlain Triangle. We'll hear from the people who've witnessed its strange phenomena firsthand, examine the scientific theories that might explain them, and explore the ancient legends that suggest these waters have been unusual since long before the first European settler ever laid eyes on them. Long before European ships ever cut through these waters, the Abenaki people called Lake Champlain Bitabagak, meaning the waters between. But they weren't just referring to the physical space between Vermont and New York. According to their oral traditions, this was a place between worlds, where the veils separating our reality from the spirit realm grew thin. The Abenaki told stories of powerful water spirits dwelling in the depths, beings that could calm the waters or whip them into a fury depending on their mood. They spoke of strange lights that would dance across the surface at night, which they believed were the torches of spirit messengers traveling between worlds. When Samuel de Champlain first explored these waters in 1609, he couldn't have known that he would become part of the lake's mysterious legacy. In his journals, he described encountering what he called a serpent-like creature, some 20 feet in length, with silver-gray scales that reflected the summer sun. Now, Champlain was an experienced explorer and navigator, not the type of man given to flights of fancy. He made detailed drawings of local flora and fauna that scientists still reference today for their accuracy. So what did he see that July morning that was so remarkable he felt compelled to document it? The late 1700s brought increased European settlement and with it the first recorded disappearances. The lake became a crucial trading route, its waters busy with merchant vessels and fishing boats. In 1780, a British naval vessel, the HMS Halifax, vanished during a routine patrol. The weather was clear, the crew experienced. Search parties found no wreckage, no bodies, nothing to suggest what might have happened. This would become a haunting pattern over the next 2 centuries. boats disappearing in good weather, leaving no trace behind. The 1800s brought industrialization to the lake's shores, and with it came more regular documentation of unusual occurrences. In 1819, Port Henry's harbor master kept a detailed log describing a week when compass readings were so erratic that several ships had to delay their departures. That same year, 3 separate fishing boats reported being pulled by unseen currents toward the center of the lake, fighting their way back to shore despite calm conditions. These incidents coincided with reports of strange lights seen moving beneath the water's surface. Perhaps most intriguing are the accounts from the Underground Railroad era. Freedom seekers crossing the lake reported mysterious fogs that would suddenly appear, thick enough to hide boats from patrol vessels, but somehow allowing clear visibility of the stars above for navigation. Some credited these unusual weather phenomena with helping countless people escape to freedom. Whether divine intervention or natural occurrence, these stories added another layer to the lake's mounting mysteries. By the Civil War era, the lake had earned a reputation among sailors as a place where the normal rules of navigation didn't always apply. Ships would report losing all electrical power, only to have it inexplicably return once they left certain areas. Compasses would spin wildly in specific locations, particularly within the triangular zone we now identify as the heart of the mystery. Local newspapers of the time began collecting these accounts, though many sailors were reluctant to go on record for fear of being labeled superstitious or incompetent. If you were to pull out a map right now and draw lines between Port Henry, New York, Burlington, Vermont, and Plattsburgh, New York, you'd outline a roughly triangular section of Lake Champlain that encompasses some of its deepest and most mysterious waters. But what makes this particular area so special? Well, folks, that's where things get interesting. You see, this triangle sits right above what geologists call the Great Appalachian Suture, which really is an ancient fault line where 2 continental plates smashed together hundreds of millions of years ago. This collision created a network of deep underwater canyons and caves that we're still mapping today. In fact, just last year, a research team from the University of Vermont discovered a previously unknown cave system about 300 feet down that seems to connect to a larger network of underwater tunnels. They had to abort their ROV exploration when their equipment started giving them conflicting depth readings, something that happens with surprising frequency in this area. The lake floor in the Triangle Zone also features some pretty unusual geology. We're talking about massive underwater cliffs that drop off suddenly from 50 feet to over 400 feet deep. Local fishermen talk about the washing machine, a spot near the center of the triangle where currents from different depths collide and create vertical whirlpools that seem to defy the normal rules of water movement. Some scientists theorize that these currents, combined with the unique mineral composition of the underlying rock formations, might create electromagnetic anomalies that could explain some of the compass and equipment malfunctions reported in the area. But here's what really gets me. The boundaries of the triangle almost perfectly match what local indigenous peoples marked on their maps as the forbidden fishing grounds centuries before anyone had the technology to detect these underwater features. How did they know? According to Abenaki oral histories, their ancestors learned to avoid these waters after several fishing canoes vanished without a trace. They described the area as a place where the water draws breath, an eerily accurate description of the vertical current movements we now know exist there. The triangle also encompasses what's known as the Burlington Plateau, a relatively flat underwater shelf that drops off dramatically on all sides. Sonar mapping has revealed strange circular depressions on this plateau that scientists can't fully explain. They're too symmetrical to be natural, but if they're artificial, who made them? And more importantly, why? On July 15, 1978, Barry Goldstein was doing what he'd done hundreds of times before, taking his 28-foot sailboat, the Aurora, out for a weekend cruise on Lake Champlain. Barry wasn't some weekend warrior who'd just bought his first boat. He'd been sailing these waters for over 20 years, served in the Navy, and was known among the Burlington sailing community as one of the most meticulous skippers around. The kind of guy who checked the weather 3 times before leaving dock and could tie a bowline knot in his sleep. That Saturday morning was about as perfect as they come. Clear skies, light winds from the northwest, and visibility for miles. Barry radioed the marina at 9:15 a.m., joking with the operator about how he might finally catch that monster pike he'd been chasing all summer. His last known position put him just off the Burlington Plateau near the center of what we now call the Triangle. At 10:47 a.m., Barry made his final radio contact. The transcript reads like something out of a science fiction novel. Here's the transcript of the actual recording. Burlington Marina, this is Aurora. You seeing this weird fog bank out here? Hang on, my compass is, that can't be right. All my instruments are Aurora. Please repeat, you're breaking up. The water's doing something strange. It's like it's, Mary, Mother of God, what is that under the, and that was it. No distress signal, no mayday call, just static. When the Coast Guard reached his last known location 40 minutes later, there was no sign of the Aurora, no debris, and no fog bank. But they did find something odd. Their own instruments were going haywire. The rescue helicopter reported extreme compass variations, and their underwater sonar was picking up what they described as phantom readings from depths that didn't match their charts. Here's where it gets even stranger. 3 days into the search, a diving team reported hearing what they described as mechanical humming coming from deep beneath the surface. When they tried to descend to investigate, all 3 divers experienced simultaneous equipment failures with their depth gauges. The official report notes that their compasses were pointing in different directions, despite the divers being within feet of each other. The case remains unsolved. The Aurora was never found, despite being in a relatively contained search area of a lake. Barry Goldstein joined a long list of experienced sailors who seemed to vanish into thin air on Lake Champlain, but his disappearance marked a turning point. It was the first time we had radio transcripts and documented equipment failures associated with a vanishing. The events of September 2nd, 1984 were witnessed by over 70 people and documented by 3 separate police departments. It began at approximately 11:45 p.m. when Burlington police started receiving calls about strange lights over the lake. But these weren't your typical UFO reports of distant lights in the sky. These lights were coming from beneath the water. Katie Morrison, a college student at the time, captured 8 minutes of footage on her Super 8 camera. While the film quality is grainy by today's standards, it clearly shows multiple bright blue-white lights moving in geometric patterns beneath the lake's surface. Here's Katie's description from her interview with the local news. They were moving too fast to be boats, too controlled to be reflections. They seemed to be dancing, almost, like they were making specific patterns. Then they all converged at one point and shot straight up out of the water into the sky. The weird thing was, there was no splash, no disturbance of the water at all. The Burlington Police Department dispatched a helicopter to investigate. Officer James Martinez was on board and filed this report. Upon approaching the coordinates, our instruments began behaving erratically. The altimeter would jump from 500 to 3,000 feet despite maintaining a steady altitude. At 23:57, we observed what appeared to be 5 distinct lights moving in formation approximately 50 feet below the water surface. They were visible to the naked eye and on our infrared cameras. At 0:03, the lights emerged from the water and ascended at a rate that our aircraft could not match. No sonic boom was detected despite the object's apparent supersonic speed. What makes this incident particularly compelling is the radar data. Burlington International Airport's radar system tracked objects moving at over 7,000 miles per hour in a zigzag pattern over the lake before they vanished off the scope. The FAA conducted a thorough investigation, ruling out military exercises, weather phenomena, and technical malfunctions. While Champy, as locals affectionately call it, has become something of a tourist attraction, The historical record of large unknown creatures in Lake Champlain is both extensive and surprisingly credible. Remember that underwater cave system I mentioned earlier? In 2012, a research submersible mapping those caves captured something unusual on its cameras. Now, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead researcher, described it this way. We were about 200 feet down, documenting the cave entrance, when our sonar picked up something massive, moving just outside our visual range. Whatever it was, it displaced enough water to create currents that we could feel in our submersible. Then it moved into view of our cameras. The body length was estimated at 35 or 40 feet based on our laser measurements. It appeared serpentine, but with clear appendages unlike anything we'd expect to find in a freshwater lake. The footage, while somewhat murky, shows a large creature with what appears to be a long neck, multiple pairs of fins, and a segmented body. Most interesting was its apparent ability to bioluminesce. The creature seemed to emit a faint bluish glow, similar to what many deep-sea creatures use to navigate in dark waters. This sighting gained particular significance when researchers discovered ancient petroglyphs along the lake's shore depicting a remarkably similar creature. Carbon dating placed these rock carvings at over 3,000 years old. The Abenaki people have stories of creatures they called Ografogosk, the great water serpents that could make themselves glow and were known to take both boats and swimmers. Modern sonar surveys have detected large biological masses moving at depths of 400 plus feet, often in areas near the underwater cave systems. These readings suggest creatures significantly larger than any known species of freshwater fish. What's particularly interesting is that these sonar contacts often coincide with reports of electronic equipment malfunctions and compass anomalies, suggesting a possible connection between the biological and electromagnetic phenomenon observed in the triangle. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. There's got to be a rational explanation for all of this, right? Well, that's exactly what Dr. Margaret Chen thought when she began her 3-year study of Lake Champlain's anomalies in 2019. What she and her team from MIT discovered, though, only deepened the mystery. Let's start with the geology, because this is where things get really interesting. The lake sits on what geologists call a tectonic suture zone, essentially a massive scar in the Earth's crust where two ancient continents slammed together about 450 million years ago. Dr. Chen's team discovered that this collision left behind something unusual: layers of magnetite-rich deposits interwoven with veins of quartz crystal, creating what she describes as naturally occurring geometric arrays. Here's the fascinating part. These arrays are arranged in patterns remarkably similar to what we use in modern electromagnetic technology. Dr. Chen explains, what we're seeing is essentially a natural antenna array buried beneath the lake. These formations appear capable of both amplifying and distorting electromagnetic fields in ways we're still trying to understand. During our study, we recorded electromagnetic fluctuations up to 300 times stronger than what would be expected in a typical freshwater lake. But that's just the beginning. The team also documented something they called gravitational anomalies, localized areas where objects appeared to weigh slightly more or less than they should. These variations were small, just 0.1% to 0.3% difference from normal, but they were consistent and measurable. Even more intriguing, these anomalies appeared to shift location based on lunar cycles and seismic activity. The water itself presents another scientific puzzle. Analysis of water samples from the triangle area revealed unusual properties. Dr. James Thompson from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution explains, we found significant variations in the water's density and electrical conductivity, particularly at depths between 150 and 300 feet. These variations create distinct layers of water that don't mix normally. This layering effect can bend light in strange ways and could potentially create optical illusions, what some might interpret as underwater lights or moving shapes. The team also documented what they called thermoclines of unknown origin, patches of water that were significantly warmer or colder than their surroundings. with no apparent heat source or sink. These temperature variations often coincided with the electromagnetic anomalies, suggesting some kind of interaction we don't yet understand. Perhaps most intriguing are the acoustic phenomena. The research vessel Nautilus recorded something extraordinary during a 2021 survey: infrasound frequencies emanating from the deeper parts of the lake. These sound waves, too low for human ears to detect, matched patterns previously recorded in other locations known for unusual phenomena, including parts of the Bermuda Triangle. Dr. Chen's team also found evidence of what they termed standing waves in the electromagnetic field around the lake. These persistent patterns of energy shouldn't be stable in a natural environment, yet they recorded the same configurations repeatedly over their 3-year study. Even more bizarrely, these patterns seemed to intensify during the same lunar phases when historical disappearances had occurred. The cave systems add another layer of scientific intrigue. Sonar mapping revealed that many of the underwater caverns contain large pockets of trapped gases, primarily hydrogen and methane. When these gases release suddenly, they can create a phenomenon known as a density cascade, essentially a column of water with different physical properties than its surroundings. This could, in theory, explain some of the reported equipment malfunctions and navigational issues. However, as Dr. Chen notes in her concluding remarks, what makes the Lake Champlain Triangle particularly fascinating from a scientific standpoint is not any single anomaly. It's the way these various phenomena appear to interact with each other. The electromagnetic disturbances influence water density, which affects gas release from the caves, which in turn impacts the electromagnetic field. It's a complex feedback loop that we've never seen before in any other body of water. We can measure these effects, but we still can't fully explain their cause or predict their behavior. When asked about the disappearances and sightings, Dr. Chen remains cautiously analytical. Science demands that we look for natural explanations, and we've found several mechanisms that could contribute to the reported phenomena. But I have to admit, there are aspects of this lake's behavior that don't fit neatly into our current understanding of physics. We're either dealing with natural processes we don't yet comprehend, or, well, I'll leave the speculation to others. You might think that having your local lake labeled as a mysterious triangle where boats disappear would be bad for business. But the folks around Lake Champlain have learned to embrace their unusual neighbor, turning these unexplained phenomena into a thriving tourist industry. Take Pete's Marina in Burlington. They used to be just another boat rental place until they started offering mystery triangle tours. Now they run 3 boats a day during peak season, all equipped with specialized electromagnetic sensors that visitors can monitor themselves. Sarah McKenzie, owner of the Champlain Mystery Museum in Port Henry, tells me they've seen visitor numbers triple since Dr. Chen's research was published. People come from all over the world, she says: scientists, paranormal investigators, curiosity seekers. We even had a documentary crew from Japan last summer. But what's really interesting is how the locals have changed their attitude over the years. It used to be that nobody wanted to talk about their strange experiences on the lake. Now it's become part of our identity. The annual Lake Champlain Triangle Festival, started in 2020, now draws over 20,000 visitors to Burlington each summer. Local artists create triangle-themed artwork. Restaurants serve specialty dishes like the Monster Sub and Triangle Fries, and the Burlington Harbor hosts what they call the Nightlight Float, where hundreds of boats gather in the supposedly most active areas of the triangle, hoping to witness something unusual. But it's not all tourist traps and t-shirt shops. The mysteries have attracted serious scientific attention too. The University of Vermont established the Center for Anomalous Lake Phenomena in 2021, bringing in researchers from around the world. The center provides year-round employment for dozens of local residents who assist with monitoring equipment and data collection. They've also started an educational outreach program that has local high school students helping to monitor wildlife and record electromagnetic readings. Local fishing guide Tom Blackburn, who's been working these waters for over 40 years, offers an interesting perspective. Sure, the tourism helps the economy, but that's not why most of us care about the triangle. These mysteries, they're part of our heritage now. My grandfather had stories about the lake, my father too, and now I've got my own. It's like living next door to a celebrity who never quite reveals their secrets. Makes life more interesting, you know? Even the skeptics have found their niche. The Triangle Truth Tours, run by retired physics teacher Linda Martinez, take a scientific approach to explaining the phenomena. We show people the underwater caves, demonstrate how temperature inversions can create optical illusions, explain the geological foundations of the electromagnetic anomalies, she says. But you know what's funny? Even with all the scientific explanations, about half our customers walk away more convinced than ever that something truly mysterious is going on here. When I first started researching the Lake Champlain Triangle, I expected to find a few fishing stories blown out of proportion, maybe some misidentified natural phenomena. Instead, I found myself diving into one of the most well-documented mystery zones in North America. What makes this place truly special isn't just the disappearances, the lights, or even the possible prehistoric creature lurking in its depths. It's the way these mysteries have brought people together. From the Abenaki people who first recognized these waters as extraordinary, to modern scientists still puzzling over its anomalies, to local residents who've made peace with their unusual neighbor, the Lake Champlain Triangle reminds us that some of the world's most fascinating mysteries aren't hidden away in remote corners of the earth. Sometimes they're right in our backyards, quietly waiting for someone to notice them. I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Margaret Chen and her research team for sharing their findings with us, to the local residents who trusted us with their stories, and to the Burlington Historical Society for providing access to their archives. And of course, a huge thank you to all of you mystery seekers out there for joining me on another journey into the unknown. Next episode, we will be exploring the strange case of the Roanoke colony disappearance, but with some new evidence that's never been discussed publicly before. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one. Until then, keep your eyes open, your mind sharp, and remember, sometimes the best mysteries are hiding in plain sight. This is David Culpepper, signing off from Legends and Lore. Stay curious, my friends.